Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Moon Knight Month. This is episode 3, and today we're going to be covering issues 21 through 30 of Moon Knight. And starting off with issue 21, we have an interesting team up with Brother Voodoo, who would later be known as Dr. Voodoo, but right now he's just Brother Voodoo. And the interesting thing about Brother Voodoo is that the original version, his name is Daniel Drum, was a supervillain, and then he died and became a ghost, and then his brother, Jericho, became the new Brother Voodoo, but he's a good guy, and he has control over his evil brother's ghost. And I haven't read a lot of Brother Voodoo storylines, but I'm guessing that, his brother continuously, still tries to do evil things, and Jericho has to keep him in line, So yeah, without further ado, let's see what happens when Brother Voodoo and Moon Knight cross paths. I'm sure it'll be interesting. Alright, so issue 21 begins with Moon Knight in Haiti fighting a gang known as the Gun Runners, or the Gun Ringers, is what he refers to them as. He's been sent there by this guy named Gerard, who is I think that's his name, right? Or Gerald. And he's been sent to Haiti in order to take down these terrorists. And yeah, he's going to be paid for it because he's a mercenary. And when he heads there to fight these gang members, Brother Voodoo shows up, or at least Daniel's ghost shows up first, and then Brother Voodoo, and then Jericho shows up. And they help Moon Knight fight the terrorists, and then Daniel possesses one of the terrorists' bodies, and so Brother Voodoo is like, Daniel is gonna lead us to the terrorist base, so all we have to do is follow him. And Moon Knight tells Frenchie to take one of the guys that they knocked out, the terrorist guys that they knocked out, take him away in the helicopter and question him and take him to authorities. And so while Frenchie is doing that, Moon Knight and Brother Voodoo head into a canoe in order to go in the direction that Daniel would have gone in the possessed body. So they go after him and they head into the forest, and a bunch of Brother Voodoo reveals why he's there. He's searching for the Grand Bois, who is said to, I think that's how you pronounce it, the Grand Bois, who is said to be residing in Haiti. He's basically this voodoo priest who controls Zuvembes and is just evil, and so he's there to stop him. And so a bunch of Zuvembes appear from throughout the water, that they're going down, the river, and so Moon Knight and Brother Voodoo are forced to fight these Zuvembes. And they manage to fight them off, and the Zuvembes escape down a different path. And there's two paths. There's a right path and a left path. Zuvembes went down the right path, terrorists went down the left path. So, Brother Voodoo tells Moon Knight to go down the left path, while Voodoo will go down the right path. So Moon Knight goes down the left path with Frenchie in the helicopter, because Frenchie comes back after doing his little errand. And they head down the left path. Voodoo heads down the right path, and when Moon Knight gets to the end of the left path, he realizes that the right path and the left path are connected, except the left path is higher than the right path. And so the path that Voodoo is going down ends with a waterfall, and Moon Knight's like, oh crap, Voodoo's gonna fall to his death. So he goes and he grabs Voodoo, and Voodoo's like, let go of me, Moon Knight, and he drops to his death, but he doesn't actually die. And Moon Knight's like, oh, okay. And then he turns around, there's a bunch of guys with guns, and is like, oh, maybe Brother Voodoo jumped down there on purpose because he didn't want to get shot by these guys. And then Brother Voodoo appears, and his twin brother unpossesses one of the terrorists, and the terrorists run away. And Moon Knight goes to go after them, and Voodoo's like, no. They've already sounded the alarms. Running in there is going to be suicidal. So what we'll do is we'll do this stealthily. And so Moon Knight and Brother Voodoo go over the walls, and they look in to the inner windows. And Moon Knight sees the man that hired him. And so he comes to the conclusion that he is the leader of the terrorists. And so it turns out Giscard is his name. I said Gerard. It's Giscard. Giscard is the Grand Bois, and he's the leader of the terrorists. And the reason he's doing this is... the reason he hired Moon Knight is to beat up some of his guys so that it makes him look good to the government, so that they instill him as, like, leader. And then by the time they realize that he's the leader of the terrorists, it's too late. He already owns everything. So Giscard is like, you figured out my plan, and presses a button on his desk, and shoots a poison dart into Moon Knight, knocking him out. And he's like, obviously I can't let you go alive. And Moon Knight wakes up, bounded up in, like, Giscard's little, like, dungeon. And that's when Giscard reveals that his third identity, ironically he has multiple identities like Moon Knight does, his third identity is the Grand Bois, and he is the one in control of the Zuvembes, and he has this giant totem called a Wangal, and once the moon rises and hits the Wangal, it will summon the Zuvembes and give him full control over them, because he doesn't have full control yet. They are listening to one of his biddings, which is to slay Brother Voodoo and Moon Knight. But once the moon light hits the Wangal, he will have full control over them and be able to tell them to do whatever he wants. But Brother Voodoo shows up and sets the place on fire to distract the Zuvembes, because Brother Voodoo has fire powers, and he frees Moon Knight and then uses his fire powers to cover the moonlight, and tells, like, so before it can hit the Wangal, and tells Moon Knight to destroy the Wangal to stop the voodoo magic. Moon Knight throws one of his truncheons at it. It doesn't do anything because he's not strong enough. So he gets Frenchie to just blast the crap out of the Wangal in the helicopter, like in the mooncopter, which he does. He smashes the Wangal and destroys it, and then which kills all the Zuvembes. And then the Grand Bois tries to escape, and he is turned on by all of his terrorists friends, because it turns out they were the ancestors, or they are the ancestors of the Zuvembes, the people that were turned into Zuvembes, and that the only reason they were working for Giscard in the first place was because he had control of their ancestors. And so now that he doesn't, they're going to turn on him, and he gets taken in by his own allies, and Brother Voodoo and Moon Knight go their separate ways, and Brother Voodoo is like, if you ever need my help again, just call me, and I'll be happy to help you too. I'm really glad we were able to help each other. And that's where it ends. That's the end of the story. I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was a fun crossover with Brother Voodoo. It was cool that we had the earlier issue with the fake Zuvembes, and then came across real ones. I think that was some cool setup. I feel like Doug Mensch was always planning that, where he would have one story where it's fake Zuvembes, and then have Moon Knight face real ones. But yeah, the next issue that we're going to be covering, issue 22, isn't a crossover issue. And instead, we're going back to a more grounded story where Moon Knight's just going to be fighting regular criminals and gangs and things. So we'll see what happens in this issue. Alright, issue 22. This is another Morpheus story. As you know, Morpheus is the villain who is able to create energy using the, like, Ebon energy from his dreams. This story is insane, and it's gonna take a bit to explain, because it involves dreams and stuff, and as you know, when stories involve dreams, it can get a little bit confusing. So yeah, Peter Ulren, the brother of Marlene, is having constant nightmares of him being killed by Morpheus. Even though Morpheus is heavily sedated in hospital. You know, Moon Knight goes there because he gets this feeling that he needs to check on Morpheus all of a sudden. So he goes to the room. There's these two janitors who are working there. One of them's like, hey, who's that? And the other guy's like, that's Morpheus. Here's his origin. Here's his powers. And Moon Knight goes there and he sees Morpheus and he's still in the bed. And he's like, well, you know, he's still here, so I'm all good. Obviously, there's no problem. And then this mysterious shadow appears from behind Moon Knight while he's standing on top of the building and attacks him. And so Moon Knight punches him. And then he goes to grab him. And then he sees Marlene falling off of the building. And he's like, no, Marlene! And then she disappears. It turns out Mark is dreaming, but he's not. Like, he's not asleep, but he's dreaming. He's, like, daydreaming. And then the mysterious figure pushes him off the building. And Moon Knight falls to the ground. And then he looks and he sees the figure running away. He's like, shit. Alright, I gotta head back to, like... I gotta go to Gina's diner and chill there because I'm having a rough night. I'm dreaming of shadowy figures and Marlene falling off of buildings. Meanwhile, Morpheus is just chilling in bed. Not awake or anything, so you're kind of wondering, like, what's happening? If Morpheus is still asleep, what's going on? So, Jake gets into a conversation with Crowley, and Crowley is just talking about how there's these guys that were, like, dreaming, and then things would happen in real life. Like, there was a guy that dreamed that he was going to kill one of his workmates, and then when he woke up, he went and killed him. And, so that's kind of creepy. And Mark's like, alright, you've put me off of my food, I'm leaving. Meanwhile, Peter shows up at the Grant Mansion because he's been having these nightmares. He's like, hey, I need your help. Like, I'm having these horrible nightmares. I think I'm getting telekinesis. Like, these dreams, I can't explain them through science. Because I'm having these dreams and then things are happening. So, like, I had a dream that Morpheus attacked my house and broke through my window. But then when I woke up, the window wasn't broken. But the vase next to the side of my bed was. So I'm starting to think maybe I have, like, telekinesis or something. And so, Steve tells Peter to go with Frenchie and Marlene so that they can drop him off back home and look after him. And as they're making their way back, Peter goes to sleep. And then they get attacked by this giant snake creature coming out of the tunnel that they were about to go into, causing Frenchie to crash the car. And Frenchie and Marlene are just like, holy shit, like, what the hell was that? And they actually get knocked out for a little bit. An ambulance later on comes to pick them up. And so they're out of the story for the rest of the issue. So Moon Knight heads back to Morpheus after what's going on to check on him, and he notices that Morpheus is still asleep. And then he gets attacked by the mysterious shadowy figure, and he beats the crap out of it, and the shadow figure runs away, and so Moon Knight chases after him. And that's when Moon Knight ends up in this weird nightmare world where New York has turned into, like, this just weird nightmare place where there's a clown owning a hot dog stand, and there's, like, these weird top hat men with slaves, and one of the slaves is like, save me, Moon Knight, and Moon Knight's like, of course I'll save you, come with me. And then they see, like, giant bats, and then a giant snake shows up, and then the slave becomes Marlene, and Marlene runs into the snake's mouth and gets eaten by it, and Moon Knight is like, no, I can't believe I let her get eaten by that snake. And then he hears a bunch of clapping that's like, bravo, bravo. And he wakes up, and it turns out that he's in the subway and a train's coming at him, and Moon Knight's like, whoa, I was asleep there for a sec. Oh, Jesus, better get away out of this train. And then he sees the mysterious shadowy figure, and he heads after them and tackles them and beats the crap out of them again, but the shadow figure fights against him, and so Moon Knight picks up some nearby luggage and throws it at the shadow thief, knocking him out. And then Moon Knight ends up in the nightmare world again. He ends up dreaming again, and he gets attacked by all of his personalities. Steve Grant shows up, Jake Lockley shows up, Mark shows up, and so Moon Knight has to fight them all, and Mark is the hardest one to fight, and his like dream version of Mark is really upset because Moon Knight has basically discarded him and has been Steve and Jake. He's like, you've been Steve and Jake this whole time, and like, who cares about me? You know, you see me as too dangerous, too reckless. Well, maybe you're right. Maybe I am dangerous and reckless, especially dangerous towards you. And Moon Knight just beats the crap out of Mark, and he's like, you're not me, I'm me. I'm Moon Knight, and is like beating the crap out of him. And then it turns out that he is just beating up a bunch of mannequins. He wakes up from the dream state that he's in, and then he sees Jake Lockley's cab coming straight at him, and it's being driven by the shadowy thief. So Moon Knight throws one of his darts at it to break the tire, which causes the cab to crash. So the shadow thief jumps out, and Moon Knight and the shadow thief fight each other. And Moon Knight does something kind of cool. So he keeps almost going to sleep while they're fighting. So Moon Knight jabs himself with his own dart to keep himself awake during the fight, long enough that he beats the crap out of the shadow thief, and then unmasks him, and it's Peter Oren. It was Peter Oren the whole time. So it turns out, and we find out on the next page, that Peter wasn't found in the car crash when Frenchie and Marlene were found. It turns out that he had been possessed by Morpheus the entire time. So while Morpheus was asleep, he was using his powers and the connection that he had with Peter to control Peter's body and make him do his bidding. And then, because they suspected that Morpheus was the one doing it, they upped Morpheus's drugs, and that was the worst decision they could make. Because the more drugs they gave him, the more Morpheus dreamed. And the more he dreamed, the more powerful his dreams became, until they became so powerful that his dreams broke into reality, and he was able to wake himself up. And so now Morpheus is awake. He takes control of the two janitors that are in the hospital, and he kills both of them. But before he kills the second one, he has the second janitor call up Moon Knight and tell him that Morpheus is still asleep. So Moon Knight thinks that Morpheus wasn't behind it still. Meanwhile, what he doesn't know is that Morpheus is out, he's escaped, and he's going to wreak havoc, try and kill Moon Knight, and just cause havoc around New York. And Moon Knight has no idea what's going on. And that's where it ends. It ends with Moon Knight carrying Peter away, thinking that everything's over, and not realizing that some shit's about to start. And we're about to find out what happens with Morpheus in the next issue. Alright, issue 23. Continuing on from where issue 22 left off. Morpheus is alive. Peter is connected to Morpheus through his dreams. He can contact with Morpheus and communicate with him. So Moon Knight, Frenchie, and Marlene are taking Peter to Steve Grant's house in the Snowy Mountains in order to get him away from Morpheus and figure out what's going on. They say that they're going to try and keep Peter awake. They never try to do that. He always goes to sleep. He goes to sleep while they're driving the car. And so he nods off. And then when he's asleep, Morpheus contacts him, and Peter just tells Morpheus where they're going. And then he gets woken up by Marlene. She's like, Peter, wake up. And he's like, bro, what are you doing? You say you're going to keep him asleep, and then the second you take your eyes off of him, he goes to sleep, and he just tells Morpheus where you are. Seriously? So they put Peter in the house, and they come up with different ways to defeat Morpheus if he shows up. Marlene suggests using a mirror like Medusa, because Morpheus is a ghost, is like a god, based on a god, so maybe that'll work. And Moon Knight suggests rigging the generator, because that's what beat Morpheus last time. And so Moon Knight and Frenchie go to rig the generator while Marlene stays behind and watches Peter. Except she doesn't watch Peter. She's supposed to keep him awake. But he falls asleep. And then as soon as he falls asleep, Morpheus shows up at the door. And Marlene, he tries to open it, and Marlene just, shuts the door on him. And Morpheus is just wow, Marlene is, using all of, her resources in order to keep me out. And it's bro, all she did was shut the door. She didn't try anything. She just shut the door. And he's wow, this girl's tough. She knows all sorts of tricks. And then he just uses his powers to take control of Marlene's mind. And then Marlene goes into the basement and with a lit match, blows up the generator because she's under his control. And so Moon Knight and Frenchie are like, quick, grab her, let's get out of here. And they jump out of the basement with Marlene as the generator explodes, and that snaps Marlene out of Morpheus's control. Peter tries to touch Morpheus because he kind of like loses control of Peter a little bit for a second, and Peter is like, hey Morpheus, let me touch you. And he goes over to touch Morpheus, and that's when we discover Morpheus's weakness, which is Peter. Apparently, if Peter touches Morpheus or gets really close to him, Morpheus loses his powers. So Morpheus is like, get away from me! And Peter is under Morpheus's control, so he listens to Morpheus and walks away. Moon Knight finds Peter. Frenchie takes Marlene away to keep her safe. Moon Knight finds Peter standing on the edge of a cliff. He also comes across Morpheus and has like a fight with Morpheus. That comes later. First, Moon Knight heads into the house where Morpheus is. He finds Morpheus. He fights Morpheus. And he actually uses a mattress, ironically, to help negate Morpheus's powers. He gets up close enough to punch him in the face, and then Morpheus just blasts him, and Moon Knight just goes flying out of the building, and he's just like, ah! And that's when he sees Peter standing on the edge of a cliff. And because he's in the sky, Moon Knight decides to try and like jump down on top of Peter, but then somehow he ends up in Peter's place, standing on the edge of the cliff, and Peter touches him, and Moon Knight ends up in the dream world. He falls off the cliff into water, and in this like dream nightmare state, he finds a giant clam, and out of the giant clam comes Morpheus dressed as the Black Knight on the back of a horse. And so he fights Moon Knight, but Moon Knight grabs his joust, and vaults Black Knight Morpheus over his head, and smashing him into a cliff and waking up Moon Knight from the dream world. And then Moon Knight realizes that he's still underwater and that he's freaking drowning. And he's like, I'm drowning, I gotta get out of here. And he quickly swims up to the surface and gets out, and he's like, Jesus, I almost drowned. And he reunites with Frenchie and Marlene, and then Morpheus shows up and starts attacking them. And so Moon Knight starts fighting him again. Morpheus is like, I'm gonna kill you all because that's my goal. You know, I gotta kill everyone who I hate. And Marlene sees a figure coming at her. She's in the middle of the forest, having been separated from Moon Knight and Frenchie. She sees a figure coming at her, and she thinks it's Morpheus, so she picks up a gun and she shoots him in the shoulder, and it turns out it's Peter. She shot Peter in the shoulder. She's like, oh my god, Peter, I thought you were Morpheus. He's like, I'm fine, you just shot me in the shoulder, it's all good, I'm fine. Moon Knight decides that he has one plan up his sleeve, like one more trick up his sleeve that could possibly beat Morpheus. He decides to listen to Marlene's previous plan. He grabs a giant mirror, and basically he tricks Morpheus into shattering the mirror. Because, like, basically, like, he uses the mirror to trick Morpheus. So he has Marlene, Peter, and Frenchie crouch somewhere else so that their reflections are at an angle, like, so that they're at an angle where the reflections are in the mirror, and it looks like they're just right in front of Morpheus. So he attacks the mirror thinking he's attacking them, but he's actually just attacking a mirror, and that allows Moon Knight to get the jump on Morpheus, grab him from behind, and basically he just strangles Morpheus to the point that Morpheus passes out. He just strangles him until he passes out. And then Peter's like, alright, I'm going to touch Morpheus now, get rid of his powers. And he touches Morpheus, and he saps out Morpheus' powers. Morpheus turns back into a normal dude. Peter collapses and dies. That's right. Peter dies. He used all of his strength to turn Morpheus back into a human and died in the process. And we end on the picture of a blue rose in the middle of, like, in the snow, and just Marlene crying at the death of her brother, losing her brother. And that's where it ends. It just ends with the three of them surrounding Peter's body and mourning him. And I will say, that first Morpheus storyline was mediocre, like the original one way back. Like, I enjoyed it, but it was like, eh. I appreciate Morpheus more as a character now because I really liked this 2-part storyline that we went through with Peter. I especially was not expecting Peter to die that way at the end. I was expecting that he was going to like take Morpheus' powers, but I wasn't expecting that to kill him. Yeah, very sad ending. Alright, Moon Knight issue 24. This is an issue that I've been waiting for, and some of you may have also been waiting for if you've been listening to this podcast. The return of Scarlet Fasanera. Yeah, she's back. She's back. And she's out for blood. She is going after the syndicate that were responsible for ruining her son's life. Specifically, their boss, whose name we will learn later. So, members of the syndicate are at a pub just having a drink. And she just shows up and kills them all with a crossbow. She's not using a gun because she killed her son with a gun, and she sees a crossbow as being a better means. So, like, she doesn't want to use guns, but she's happy to use a crossbow because at least it won't remind her of her dead son. So she heads in and she shoots all the guys with a crossbow, and she has enough bolts for all of them because it was planned. And then she uses her lipstick to write an S on the wall, and then she leaves. And Moon Knight hears somebody screaming bloody murder, and so he heads down, and he sees her getting away, and he's like, stop! And she shoots at him with a crossbow, and with her crossbow, and Moon Knight jumps over it, and he's like, it was a woman. And he pretty much instantaneously knows who this woman is, especially when he finds out that it was the syndicate. He sees the red lipstick with the S. He puts 2 and 2 together at Scarlet Fasanera. They don't even try to like Doug isn't like, oh, this is going to be a mystery the whole time. It's like, no, right out of the gate, he's like, nah, it's Scarlet. Like, the reader knows it's Scarlet. So Moon Knight heads to the chapel, and he sees that everything's pretty normal there, and then he finds a very obvious clue for a funeral wreath that leads him to a nearby graveyard, where he straight up comes across Scarlet, and he has a conversation with her, and, you know, obviously she's there at Joseph's grave, and she just talks about the fact that, like, the syndicate are evil, and that she doesn't have any real purpose anymore, and that her purpose now is to get rid of that evil. She might take down a criminal stealing a purse every now and then, but her main goal is to kill the syndicate and their leader. She talks about how she then goes and talks about Manny Sindone, who is the leader of the syndicate, and how he has been responsible for ruining her life. He gave her son heroin one time for free, the first time, and then after that, you know, he had to start doing muggings and stuff, and that's how he became, and they started calling him Mad Dog, and that's how, so Manny Sindone is the one responsible for her son. But he's also done a lot of other terrible things. He killed a woman and stuffed her dead body in his trunk because she wouldn't go out with him. And after that, everyone just started calling him a ladies' man. He's done all sorts of horrible things. And she's like, look, you can try and stop me, but you're not going to. And you're not going to convince me to not do this. I'm going after Manny Sindone, and I'm going to kill him. You can either help me or get out of my way. And so Mark heads back because he's conflicted. Because Manny is a terrible person, but he doesn't believe in killing. And so he heads back and he goes to Marlene and he says, Marlene, I've got one question for you. He doesn't even console Marlene over the death of her brother, which is definitely something that is weighing on her shoulders. She seems quite withdrawn from Mark, and it's probably because he isn't asking her about that. He's more focused on the Moon Knight stuff. But he goes, Marlene, I need your help. I need your opinion on something. If somebody you knew was going to go out and kill someone, he doesn't say kill, he just says, eliminate someone. Would you stop them? And Marlene was like, yeah, I'd stop them. And he's like, yeah, but what if this person was really evil and they deserved it? Would you still stop them? And Marlene says, like, I don't think I would stop them in that case, but, like, it never has to be one option or the other. You know, there's always the third option. And then Moon Knight realizes, and he's like, that's right. You know, I can stop Manny and also stop Scarlet from killing him. I can do both. So he heads off. Scarlet goes back to the chapel and she has a bit of a cry, and then she grabs her crossbow and she goes out to go and get the job done. Frenchie and Moon Knight head off in the helicopter to Manny Sindone's house, where it's been heavily guarded. Scarlet is there, and Moon Knight jumps in. He finds Scarlet in the backyard. He jumps her, and he's like, you're the one taking action now, so it's you I've got to stop first. As for Manny, I'll just have to wait until a clear-cut crime is committed, and that's when Scarlet is like, you don't understand anything I've said, Mark. You're waiting for him to commit a crime before you take him down? Manny doesn't commit crimes. He gets other people to commit them for him. He's committing the crime still, but other people are doing it for him. You don't understand that. That's why I gotta kill him. Because if I don't kill him, he's gonna keep doing this. He's too powerful. And so a bunch of guys attack Moon Knight and Scarlet kills them with her crossbow. Moon Knight just knocks them out. And then Scarlet heads into Manny's office, kills the two guards, and then gets shot by Manny in the shoulder, and she marks the wall of her blood. She's like, good thing you shot me, because now I can mark the wall with something much better than lipstick. This is, like, perfect, you know? I'm signing your death with my own blood. And then she draws her crossbow on him, and he draws a gun. It's like, finger paintings for little girls, Scarlet. And the moment you came through my door, you stepped up into the big time. And then Moon Knight comes in, he's like, hey, stop! And he throws his moon dart at Manny to knock the gun out of his hand. And at the same time, Scarlet shoots her gun. And he knocks the gun out of his hand, but the crossbow is too fast. And goes straight into his chest and kills Manny. And Manny's body just slumps into his armchair, and he dies. And then Scarlet jumps out the window and is like, my job's done, see ya. Moon Knight chases after her. They get to some tracks, and Scarlet's like, I hear the train coming. If you want to stop me, like, I've done my job, so you can stop me now if you want to. Now's your chance. And Moon Knight, she, like, drops her crossbow and, like, surrenders herself to Moon Knight. And Moon Knight throws his truncheon at her and misses her on purpose. And she's like, thank you. And maybe I'll see you again. You can tell your friend Flint about me. And then she jumps onto the train and rides away on the train. And Moon Knight stands on the tracks. He's like, come get me, Frenchie. And tell me if a loser can ever be a winner. And then it ends there. And it ends with, again, we're kind of left on this cliffhanger of like, is this the last time we're going to see Scarlet? Or is she going to come back? And the chances are, it's like, yeah, she's probably going to come back. She came back this time. She's going to come back again. She's going to keep coming back until she dies. It's going to be one of those characters. She's just going to keep showing up. I really like Scarlet. I really like her relationship with Mark. The like the way that they kind of like mirror each other. Yeah, no, I really like this character, and I am looking forward to just seeing her come back. I want her to keep coming back. Not too much, but I do want her to come back. But yeah, that's the end of that issue. And the next issue, a little bit of a tease, something or someone called the Black Spectre is going to be featured in issue 25. So let's see who this is. Alright, Moon Knight issue 25. This is a double-length issue. Not only does it tackle with Moon Knight dealing with people who are trying to take his image and twist it in a dark way, but also this one really tackles the problem, which is Steve and Marlene's relationship and how toxic it is, and that they both are like doing things in the relationship that are causing it to be toxic. It's not just Marlene. Steve is doing stuff too, but you know, I'm trying to look at this from both sides, and it's very hard not to see Marlene as being the more problematic one, because that's just how it's written. And you'll see what I mean. I mean, I've talked about it before. There's hard reasons as to why she's the main problem in the relationship, and Steve has issues, but like they're things that he can help, or at least he is trying to change about himself. Who knows? Maybe she's going to change too, but that's at least what I would hope. But the main part of this story is this man named Carson Knowles. He's a vet who's just come back from the war. Everyone hates him, or at least like the people that hate war hate him, because he was in the army. He got replaced at his job. He ends up getting a job as a cabbie, which only requires him to have a car, but it also pays very little money. And then he goes and visits this guy named Mr. Cranston, who is a political figure in New York. He's also done a lot of dirty stuff. And he tells Cranston that he's going to run for mayor, and Cranston laughs in his face, and he says, "I'm going to prove you wrong, Cranston. One day you're going to be supporting me." And then he heads off. And he gets on the phone, and he finds out that his ex-wife had a son, and that his son is just dead and dies. This plays no role in the further part of the story. It's just to show how shit Carson's life is. And then right after that, he finds his car has just been completely smashed and totaled. And then another car drives by and douses him in water. And then he gets held at knife point by a dude. This all happens all at the same time. He gets held at knife point, and that's when he snaps, beats the crap out of this criminal, like out of this thief, steals his money, and decides that he is not only going to change the city, but he's also going to take care of the people that are making his life miserable, including Mr. Cranston. He sees a magazine with Moon Knight on the cover, and he decides that he's going to become the dark image of Moon Knight. So he goes to a local bar joint and hires 3 dudes to become his gang. He calls them his knights. And then he becomes the Black Spectre, who is basically, kind of looks like Ares from DC. Basically just Ares. That's what he looks like. And then he runs for mayor, and so as Black Spectre goes around and forces people, like forces gang members and stuff, to support Carson. Meanwhile, Carson represents himself as this all-good image that the city will love. And what they don't know is that Carson and Black Spectre are the same person. And he goes and he finds Cranston, and he has his knights beat the crap out of Cranston's men, and then he beats the crap out of Cranston, and forces Cranston to support Carson, or he will leak all of the dirty stuff that Cranston has done. And it works, because Moon Knight and Flint go and talk to Cranston, and Cranston won't talk, and he won't reveal anything. And they're like, shit, we can't get anything from him. We have a feeling that, like, the Black Spectre is probably Carson, because the way that, like, because it's just coincidental that Black Spectre is working for Carson. And then this is confirmed for Moon Knight, because he actually comes into conflict with Carson, and he fights Black Spectre, and he rips his mask off, and he sees Carson's face, and then when he sees Carson on the news, he's like, man, they're the same person. Now I've got to prove that they are the same person. And this is when Marlene and Steve's relationship really hits its, like, bad moments, because Marlene just straight up breaks up with Steve, because, she thinks that Steve is going back into his psychological problems, and that like he's actually crazy, like he's becoming crazy again. And this is the problem I have with Marlene, and this is why I see her as the bigger problem in the relationship and not Steve, is that even though Steve is getting too into Moon Knight, that he's kind of neglecting her in a way. Um, it's the fact that she calls him crazy instead of actually trying to help him with his issues. You know, it's kind of like if she actually like tried to understand him and his psychological problems rather than just call him crazy and slander him for it, maybe he would start, you know, paying more attention to her and not Moon Knight. You know, I'm not saying that Mark isn't in the wrong. He definitely is in the wrong for not paying attention to Marlene and focusing more on Moon Knight than her. But Marlene is definitely more in the wrong, and I just can't stand it when people, I just think it's very wrong for a partner to not help their significant other and instead just mock them and say, oh, you're crazy and I can't handle that and that's why I'm breaking up with you, because I can't handle the fact that my partner has psychological problems that I'm not going to help them with or help them understand or even set Mark up with a therapist. Why hasn't she tried doing that? You know, instead she's just resorted to just breaking up with him. And I think the thing that makes it worse, that kind of makes her look like a bad person, is that Mark asks her to go on the inside with Carson so that she can, like, figure out if he's a bad person or not. And immediately, she's known Carson for a day, and immediately she believes Carson over Mark. And it's like, yeah, Carson's a good person. I think you're chasing wrong leads. You know, he's a good guy. I've known him all but a day. You know, Mark, I've known you for, like, 2 years. But I'm gonna believe this guy that I've known a day over this man who I have been in a relationship with for 2 years. It just felt like, you know, how can it, like, it's just really hard to not see Marlene as just being an idiot in this, like, just being really stupid, you know? And Mark's stupid for not opening up more to Marlene and, you know, not listening to her problems. But at the same time, Marlene is being a real idiot right now, believing Carson, this guy that she's only known for a day. Carson puts Frenchie in the hospital. He has his knights attack him from behind, and so Frenchie ends up in the hospital. And so Moon Knight decides that, like, he's had enough. And so, like, he's like, if you want to play games, Carson, let's play games. Because, like, people aren't believing him. And so he holds a press conference to just say that, like, the Black Spectre and Carson are the same person. And he's got Flint there with him. And they ask Flint, they're like, do you have any proof that it's Carson? And Flint's like, no. And, like, what about Cranston? Like, you say that, like, Carson beat the crap out of Cranston, but did Cranston say anything? And he was like, no, Cranston refused to say anything. And they were like, yeah, we just don't really have proof. And so the people are just like, well, you know, we can't believe you, and we all hate Moon Knight for trying to slander the great name of Carson, the man that we want as the mayor. And Marlene is just like, oh, you're getting what you deserve, Mark, for trying to slander this innocent man. You know, because Mark gets shot by the police because the police are after him. And all Marlene can really say to him is, like, she's shocked that he's been shot, but at the same time, she's kind of taken the stance of, like, well, you've caused this problem on your own, like, for, you know, saying all this awful stuff about Carson that is definitely not true. And then she just leaves him. He's literally bleeding out, and she's just like, see you, Mark. You know, I'm gonna go back to Carson, because I believe him, and you need to help yourself, because this is all your own fault. And so, crawling across the ground, bleeding out, Mark goes up to the statue of Khonshu, and he pleads for the statue of Khonshu to give him the strength that he needs in order to defeat Carson, because he swears to Khonshu that he will take down Carson and prove that Black Spectre and Carson are the same person. And so we cut to the mayoral rally with Carson about to be announced as a new mayor of the city. Everyone's calling him, "We want Nose, we want Nose, we want Nose." And this is when Marlene kind of realizes that Carson's might actually not be a great guy, because he calls her doll and like is being very big-headed right now because of all the people that are calling his name out. She's starting to realize, hey, maybe I am an idiot. Maybe I shouldn't have left my ex-boyfriend bleeding out to go and stand next to a guy that I barely know. So Carson goes out to the top of the roof, and he knows that Moon Knight is going to come for him, so he dresses up as Black Spectre to deal with Moon Knight once and for all, because he sees Moon Knight in the distance, and he's like, alright, here we go, final battle. And he puts on his Black Spectre suit, and he kicks Moon Knight in the back, and then he goes to stab him. Moon Knight grabs his truncheon out, and smacks, goes to hit Black Spectre, but Black Spectre just, punches Moon Knight with his spiked glove, and knocks him to the ground, and then he goes to his men, and he's like, yes, Black Spectre has won, I beat the Moon Knight! And then the moon signals Moon Knight's strength as he, pushes himself to stand up, and is like, I'm not saying the moon gives him power, except it probably does. I think that's the symbolism here, is that the moon is giving Moon Knight the strength to get back up, because he's like, nah, I can't let him win. I gotta prove it by stopping him. And so Moon Knight races past Black Spectre's men, beating the crap out of them. He actually takes the spikes, because when Black Spectre hit him, his spiked gauntlet stabbed into Moon Knight's chest. So Moon Knight grabs the spikes and he uses them to slash the hands of Black Spectre's men. And then he jumps into Black Spectre and smashes through the window. And they plummet down into the spotlight that is in the crowd that is chanting Carson's name. And then in front of everyone, he unmasks Carson and is like, hey! Oh, you fuckers down there who thought Carson was a good guy. Here's your proof. This is Black Spectre. There you go. He's an asshole, and he's been trying to destroy the city the whole time. You want a proof? Here it is. You fuckers. And then everyone draws their guns on him, and Flynn is like, look, you may have unmasked the Black Spectre and it's Carson, but just because he's wearing the suit, we can't actually prove that it's him. And then Marlene is like, here's your proof, Flint. I found these in Carson's desk. And gives him all the proof that he needs in order to prove that Carson was a bad guy the whole time. And then Moon Knight and Marlene are like, let's get back together. Marlene is like, look, I'm sorry I, called you crazy and I left you to die on your own floor, but, I want to be back with you. And Mark, it's just yeah, sure. Which, if I was Mark at this point, I think the tipping point would have been Marlene leaving him for dead, is the point where, as Mark, I would have been like, no. No, we're done. I'm sorry, but, you left me to die. I was bleeding out. I'd been shot and you didn't help me. So no, I don't want to be in a relationship with you. I'm sorry. But no, they end up back in a relationship because their relationship is toxic as hell. And that's it. That's the end of the issue. But Carson gets sent to prison. Who knows? Maybe the Black Spectre will come back. Maybe he won't. I guess we'll find out. Yeah, this was a longer recording because this was a double-length issue. So quite a bit happened. But yeah, that's it for issue 25, and the next issue we're going to be talking about is issue 26, so let's find out what happens next in The Adventures of Moon Knight. Alright, so issue 26, I'm going to record this a little bit differently because it actually contains two stories, two shorter stories. It's still a 28-page issue, but the stories are a lot shorter. First one written by Doug Mensch with art by Bill Svenkovich, as normal. And then the other one is written by Denny O'Neil with art by Keith Pollard. So in the first story, which is called Hit It, basically the entire story just goes alongside a band playing what is assumed to be a song called Hit Me. And we follow this character who has no name, who sees an obituary and then starts running around and hitting people repeatedly all the way to the morgue. And the entire time the sequence is happening, there is like a kid's drawing of a man hitting a child. And then so Moon Knight hears about all these people being hit by this guy, and he chases after him and finds him at the morgue. And it turns out this man, when he was a kid, was hit repeatedly by his dad, and then his dad's wife, like his mom, left, and then his dad stopped hitting him, and then so now he didn't even get that. Like it kind of became like Stockholm syndrome, where he started to enjoy getting hit by his dad because it was the only thing that his dad gave him. And then when he stopped hitting him, his dad didn't give him anything at all anymore, and that really messed him up. So he was a really screwed up kid. And so in the obituary, it turns out his dad had died, and so now he's really upset, and because he's like, you died, and I didn't even get a chance to hit you back. Like, I didn't get a chance to, give you what you gave me all those years. And then Moon Knight shows up, and the dude begs Moon Knight to hit him, and Moon Knight refuses to hit him, and the priest that's there is just like, just hit him already. Get it over with. And Moon Knight's just like, no. We're gonna do this different way. Like, it doesn't have to resort in violence. And so the Moon Knight turns around, and the guy, like, punches him in the back of the head. And so Moon Knight's like, alright, is that how you want to play it? And he turns around and he just beats the crap out of this dude. And then leaves him on the floor bleeding and walks off. And he punches the wall because he's upset. He's just like, ugh, didn't want to have to resort to that. And then he leaves. And that's it. That's the whole story. Like I said, not super long. Just a pretty, like, there's a lot of, like, I would recommend going and reading it, because it's not really a story I can, like, the story itself isn't the main part of it, it's how it's written. So I would recommend going and checking out that story, specifically in issue 26 of Moon Knight, the first volume, because there's a lot of rhyming involved. The repetitive use of the word hit me, is used consistently throughout the book to really hammer in the meaning of the story. And so it's not really a story you can experience through just me talking about it. You should definitely check this one out. But yeah, that's that story. And so the next story we're going to be talking about is The Cabbie Killer. Like I said, it's written by Denny O'Neil with art by Keith Pollard. And Denny O'Neil, I don't think, has ever written a Moon Knight story before, so let's see how he does. I mean, he's written Green Arrow and, like, Batman, so you would think, oh yeah, he'd probably, do a pretty good Moon Knight story. Guess we're about to find out. Alright, so the Cabbie Killer story is all in the name, and I will say, it's definitely a step down from, like, we go from Doug Mench's, like, pretty awesome story to this, which is definitely not Denny O'Neil's best work, because, like, he totally just crapped this one out because he had to, but it's pretty straightforward with the name. There's this man named Johnny Planet, who is kind of like, he's built like the Kingpin, and he has a bazooka, and he's hired by this man named Manny Zielko to find cabs and destroy them with his bazooka, because apparently one of Manny Zielko's old friends left a cassette tape that has, like, really secret information on it in one of the cabs, so he tells Donnie to go around and blow up cabs. One of the cabs he tries to blow up just happens to have Jake Lockley in it with the mayor. He hits a different cab behind them, but they were going for Jake, and so the mayor gets out of the cab and is like, you can just have your fare, I'll walk all the way back. Meanwhile, Jake heads back to Grant Mansion, where he tells Frenchie that he's going to go to a nearby graveyard because that's where a lot of like mobsters meet, including Manny Zilko. So he heads there, he beats up one of the guys who has a walkie-talkie so he can't call in help, and then beats up the other guys, heads into the mausoleum where he finds all of the mobsters, including Manny Zilko, playing a card game so that he can question them on this bazooka-wielding assailant. Crowley's there under the, like, he's been hired by the Mafia, but as we know, Crowley is on Moon Knight's side, so Moon Knight believes that Crowley will help him. He is told to draw a gun on Moon Knight, and Crowley misses him on purpose so that Moon Knight can then jump in, knock out Crowley without hurting him too much, and chase after Manny Zilko, who runs away. He tries to get away, so Moon Knight chases after him, and Manny jumps into a cab, and it turns out that it's Jake Lockley's cab. Moon Knight is driving it. You'd think it would be Jake driving it, but it's just Moon Knight. So now that Moon Knight has Manny hostage, he manages to squeeze the information out of Manny. Manny tells Moon Knight that he hired Donny Planet, and that Donny Planet should be on a fishing boat at the pier. So Moon Knight heads to the pier where he finds Donny Planet, and he gets into a fight with Donny Planet, who tries to crush Moon Knight's skull because he's just Kingpin, but a way less interesting character. He's just Kingpin in a sailor outfit with a bazooka and no actual like power over the city. Yeah, they have a big fight. Donnie tries to escape by jumping into the water, and Moon Knight manages to but when he goes to jump into the water, he gets caught by the fishing nets which tangle him underwater, and so Moon Knight is able to grab him, tie him up in the fishing nets, and call the police, and that's it. That's the whole story. Again, it's just a B story in a comic written by Denny O'Neil, who just clearly was not really trying. He he knew he was writing a B story, and that's what this is. It is a B story. So if you were to read this issue, I would say read the first story, skip the Cabbie Killer. It's not that interesting. It's definitely just filler. And so that's the end of issue 26. Next we're going to be covering issue 27. So I think Doug Mensch is just back to writing the whole thing, and it's just one story now. So looking forward to that. Alright, issue 27. This is actually written by somebody else, not Doug Mensch, but it's a lot better than it's a much better story than the Denny O'Neil one. This one's written by Stephen Grant, ironically, named after that same name as the character, with art by Joe Brzezowski. So something that is immediately different about this one and the approach that Steve takes is that he straight up writes Moon Knight as having multiple personalities, which is the thing that Doug Mensch does not do. He has Moon Knight constantly refer to himself as we. He refers to Jake Lockley, Stephen Grant, and Mark Spector as different people inside of him. There are moments in the story where it will be Mark Spector growled from within, wanting to be freed and wanting to get out and stuff like that. So it's a very, this is, eventually, this is the first time we've seen what Moon Knight would eventually become. But it would be a while before this would actually stick, because I'm pretty sure when Doug comes back, it just goes back to normal again. So Jake is talking to his friend Richardson, and apparently there is a cop killer going around killing cops. Richardson is confused why this cop killer is going after just regular everyday cops and how he can tell the difference between them, and Jake Lockley is just hey, and you're not afraid for your own life, are you? And Richardson's of course not, I'm fine. And then he leaves and he gets shot and he dies. Richardson's dead. And Jake Lockley's crap. And so he heads back home and becomes Steve Grant. He gets really pissed off at Marlene. Or not Marlene. He gets pissed off at the butler for calling him Jake Lockley when he's entered the house, because he's as soon as I entered that door, I'm Steve Grant. And then he kind of gets pissed off at Marlene as well, She calls him schizophrenic, so, you know, she's like, well, my favorite schizophrenic. Can't be Moon Knight? You're not dressed for it. Who are you today? Stephen, Jake, Lockley, Mark Spector? He's like, not Spector, never Spector. He's like, sorry, Marlene, I'm just really upset because my cop friend just died. Gotta figure out how these cops keep dying, like, and who's killing them. Apparently, the police have records. So, like, well, obviously they do because they're the police. So I'm going to go to the police and see if there's any records on these cops that have been killed and if they have anything in common. So he heads to the police building dressed up as a oh wait, no, I think it's Frenchie. They don't really explain it. I think Frenchie disguises himself as a policeman named Monact, who then gives the file to... Oh, wait, no. Okay, so they don't really explain it, but Moon Knight disguises himself as a policeman named Monact. It's a really weird name. And then is handed a file, and then he dresses up as Moon Knight and is like, I got the file. It's weird, because you don't see him switch costumes. There's not really a lot of context here. He doesn't really say he's going to pretend to be a policeman. He just gets given the file as a policeman, and then Moon Knight has the file. And so he heads to the file room, and with this file for the current Robertson murder, he puts it up against the other ones, and he finds out that the thing that they have in common is that they've all taken down Kingpin operations. And that's when this private detective, or not private detective, but Detective Fasanelli comes in, who he has a partner named Darius. Apparently they're both on this case. This one's Fasanelli. I mentioned that because it's important. Darius is important to the story. So, Fasanelli holds Moon Knight at gunpoint because he doesn't trust him, and Moon Knight manages to convince Fasanelli that he's on his side, and he makes a getaway because he wants to go after the Kingpin, because Kingpin was involved in all of these murders somehow, and Moon Knight believes that he was responsible. But when he goes and sees the Kingpin, Kingpin's like, look, they may have taken down my operations, but I own those cops. I paid them all off. So the fact that they're being murdered is a problem for me. But yeah, Moon Knight beats up all of his guys, and Kingpin is like, look, you came in here, and the best way to deal with a vigilante is by violence. And so Kingpin tries to, beats up Moon Knight pretty easily. He doesn't try to, he does. He beats up Moon Knight. He knocks him out in one punch, just punches Moon Knight in the face, and he's down. And then he has his men send him out, because he's like, Moon Knight's going to help me find the killer that's killing my cops, so I'm going to let him live. So, these two cops chase after a man that's speeding into an alleyway. Frenchie's like, hey, should we go and see, what's with those guys? And Moon Knight's like, I got more important things to do. Meanwhile, Mark Spector on the inside is like, Moon Knight, you idiot. This is obviously related to the case. So these two cops go after the speeder. We don't get to see their face, but the mysterious assailant pulls out a gun. It's assumed that it's the cop killer, and you would be right, because he shoots and kills one of the cops, and then pulls out his gun and kills the other one, because he cuts the radio frequency, so the cop can't call for backup. And then he shoots him, and Moon Knight gets there too late. They're both dead. And before he dies, the other one says, why, Louis, one of us, why? And Moon Knight, the assailant, is behind him still. He's still there. Draws a gun on him. Moon Knight throws his truncheon to try and hit the guy, but he's gone already. So Moon Knight believes that when he said Louis, he was talking about Lieutenant. And so he believes that Darius is the cop killer. So he goes and he corners Darius, and he questions him, and he manages to get he manages to get Darius to admit that he is killing cops, but he's doing it for the right reasons, because these cops are corrupt. And so Mark lets him go, and he goes home, and Marlene's like, why did you let him go? And Mark is like, because he might be killing people, but like he's doing it for the right reasons. And Marlene's like, that's not right though. And Mark's just like, yeah, but I kill people. Or it's Steve, I guess. Steve is like, I kill people, and Marlene's like, no you don't. Mark kills people. You don't kill. This is wrong. And Steve is like, you're right. It is wrong. I need to take down Darius. And so Fastenelli heads back to his house, and he gets paid to kill Darius. So he is a corrupt cop. And so Fastenelli calls up Darius to meet with him, and they're both planning on killing each other. And they're like, heh, the other one doesn't know that I'm gonna kill him. And that's when Steve figures out that when he said Louis, when the guy in the car said Louis, Fastenelli's middle name is Louis. And so he's like, maybe he meant Fastenelli. Or did he mean Lieutenant? Which one of them's the killer? I don't know. Maybe they're both the killer? Maybe they're both a killer? And we've just been seeing two different people killing different cops for different reasons. So Darius and Fastenelli come into conflict, guns drawn at one another. Darius shoots Fastenelli in the shoulder and is like, I'm doing this for the money. I'm not just doing this to kill corrupt cops. I'm doing it for the money. And Fastenelli is presumably killing some of these cops because they are corrupt, but he's not doing it for money. He's doing it because he thinks it's the right thing. But he's still murdering people. And so Moon Knight crashes through the door, and he takes down Darius with his truncheon and then punches him out. And then Fastenelli goes for his gun and is like, yeah, let me finish him off because, you know, he's evil and I'm good. And then Moon Knight is like, no, you're going to jail too because you're a murderer. It's like, even if you're doing it for the right things, murdering isn't good. And so you deserve to be in jail. But he doesn't actually send him to jail. He sends him to a psychiatric ward so that he can get help because he thinks that Fastenelli needs help. So, yeah, Fastenelli gets sent to a psychiatric ward. Darius gets sent to prison. And we never really get to figure out exactly who killed who. But it's presumed that, like, it doesn't really matter. You know, Fastenelli was killing some of the cops. Darius was killing some of the other cops. So it was, yeah, two different cop killers killing cops at the same time. So it looked like it was just one guy. And so Marlene and Steve have a little drink and they toast. And that was it. That's the end of the story. I liked this one. I thought it was good. I really enjoyed the kind of plot twist of it being like, oh, both of these cops are bad. You know, and that, like, there's a lot more corrupt cops in the city than you realize, and that sometimes there's no good cop. And, yeah. So that's the end of that issue. And the end of Steve Grant's one-issue tenure on Moon Knight. And in the next issue, we're back to Doug Moench. So we're going to see what happens in issue 28. Alright. Issue 28. We're actually nearing the end of Doug Moench's run on Moon Knight. His run ends with issue 30. So right now he's just like, alright, I'm buckling down. I'm doing some, you know, deep diving into Moon Knight's character, and, you know, I want to do some big reveals before I end my run. So we got Doug and Bill back, and the issue begins with Moon Knight doing what he usually does, beating up a bunch of thugs. But then he gets a call from Marlene, who tells Marlene that a friend of her dad's has asked him to come to Sudan to show them some of his research on Khonshu and stuff. And as you know, Sudan is where Mark became Moon Knight. So it's kind of a bit of a reunion for him. So he finishes up beating up the thugs and then heads back to Grant Manor in order to unite with Marlene and head off to Sudan. It's funny, Marlene mentions how while Grant is away, she's become... she started like falling in love with the statue of Khonshu. She's supposedly joking, but also this issue is the one where we kind of get the idea where, like, the statue of Khonshu is very much alive. Like, before it was kind of like a is it, isn't it? But this one makes it very clear that it is. And it's kind of like, is the statue of Khonshu actually, like, drawing Marlene in, and like, is Marlene actually falling in love with it? And she thinks it's a joke right now, but it's becoming real. I guess we'll find out. But it's hinted like that could be the case. So they head to Sudan and they meet this guy named Yusuf, who is apparently the friend of her father's, and he takes them back to a hotel, and Steve reveals that he brought his Moon Knight costume to himself. Marlene doesn't know, but he's always prepared. So he and Marlene just decide that they're going to be chilling in the mansion, and Marlene decides that she's going to go and get undressed and like get a shower or something, and she gets attacked by a dagger while she's undressing. And because she gets attacked by a dagger while she's undressing, she spends the rest of the issue in nothing but a bra and panties. Like, that is just what she wears for the rest of the issue. And it's something that I don't really think Doug Mensch thought about when they were writing this. Because part of this story involves them going into a desert. And if she's just wearing, like, bra and panties, there's, like, desert storm winds. Like, she would be ripped apart by the sand, right? Like, she would be, like, bleeding and stuff. Like, right? Like, the winds get strong in the desert, and sand can rip you apart if it gets too strong. You know, that's why they wear, like, all the clothing and stuff when they go out into the deserts. It's not just to protect themselves from the heat, but at night it's to protect themselves from the sand. So, they see a mysterious assailant running away, and they believe that's the person that threw the dagger. So Moon Knight goes after them, and the person disappears. And then Yusuf attacks Marlene, because it turns out Yusuf is the leader of this group called the Jackals, and he's looking for the secret treasure in Khonshu's temple. So he kidnaps Marlene because he thinks Marlene can show her where the treasure is. So Moon Knight heads after them. He gets into a Jeep and he just drives there. It's really funny seeing Moon Knight just drive a regular old Jeep that isn't moon-themed. And he heads into the middle of the desert, and he finds their footprints, and he follows the footprints to the Temple of Khonshu. When he gets there, he finds a guy, just like one of Yusuf's men, and interrogates this guy into telling him everything. So Moon Knight finds out that Yusuf is a member of the Jackal cult and stuff like that. Nothing to do with the Jackal character from Spider-Man, by the way. It's nothing to do with that. So, Moon Knight heads in. He finds Yusuf holding Marlene hostage. He fights Yusuf, and then Yusuf runs away, and so Moon Knight chases after him. And Marlene is like, "You're not going without me. I'm coming with you." And then Yusuf jumps out from nowhere and attacks Moon Knight. And then Moon Knight throws him, and Yusuf goes flying into a wall, which activates a trap. A giant block comes down and crushes him. It crushes Yusuf. And then and then starts like moving towards Moon Knight and Marlene. And they manage to get out of the way as the rock just smashes through a big hole in another wall, and it's through that hole they look down, and really far down in this drop that the rock has gone through, like the big square block has gone through, that's where the secret treasure is. And it also turns out Yusuf didn't actually get crushed. I just said he did so that you would think that he was dead. He survived somehow. And I guess it barely missed him, and so he just pushes Moon Knight and Marlene off of down to where the treasure is, and because it's a really far drop, Marlene hurts her ankle, while Moon Knight manages to fall onto a giant statue of Khonshu, and Yusuf starts lowering his way down to Marlene, and she's like, "You gotta get here fast, like he's gonna kill me." And Moon Knight's like, if I jump from here, I'm probably going to break my legs, and I won't make it to her, so how am I going to get down there? And that's when the statue of Khonshu bears a smile, and Moon Knight throws, like, his moon dart and cuts Yusuf's rope, causing him to drop to the ground. And so Yusuf is a bit hurt, but he's still, like, crawling to Marlene, and Moon Knight's like, I still can't get down there. And so that's when the Khonshu statue has like a little smile, and the winds from the desert mystically come into the temple, and it's assumed that it's the statue of Khonshu using like its magic or spirit to bring the winds in so that Moon Knight can use them to hover down to where Yusuf is, and he just launches himself into Yusuf, and Yusuf just gives up. He's like, no more, no more. And he passes out. And Moon Knight saves Marlene, and they decide to head home after this grand adventure. And they contemplate the fact that, like, did Khonshu help Moon Knight, or was it just a coincidence? And Moon Knight wants to believe that it was Khonshu helping him, the real spirit. And as they leave, they kind of hear, like, a bit of a cackling, some laughter, like a mysterious laughter coming after them. But then they just shrug it off, and they keep going. And then it says, and 5,000 miles away, in the moon-washed gloom of a mansion foyer, a statue tells nothing, not a single word as it dreams of lost sand, and the restless spirits therein. So yeah, that's confirmation that, like, Khonshu really is within the statue, and that he is alive, and what is his purpose? The cackling and the laughter kind of makes Khonshu sound a little bit like he's a bit mischievous, or not necessarily good, but kind of like just doing what it wants or what's better for itself, you know. So I feel like there might be this interesting idea of maybe the statue of Khonshu is not good. Maybe the statue of Khonshu is like morally grey. You know, it would explain Moon Knight's eagerness to kill, but like the fact that Moon Knight is okay with killing people. Because Khonshu's just like, whatever needs to get done, that's how we do it. You know, if you have to kill people to get what we need done, then you kill people. Alright, issue 29. This is a good one because it's we got a guest star in this one. I guess you could call it a crossover, even though I don't know if this character had an ongoing series at this time. Jack Russell, aka Werewolf by Night, appears in this issue, and we start off the story with him being chased by this cult through a train yard. This cult is led by a man named as Belial, and he believes that he is a demon, and he wants to capture Jack Russell, aka the werewolf, because he believes that Jack Russell is a demon as well, and he calls him the Beast, and he's promised his like cult members to show them the Beast, and they don't believe him. In fact, while he's giving a speech, a bunch of them leave because they're like, you've been going after this Beast for almost a year now, and you've never caught him, so we don't believe you, so we're gonna leave. And Belial works for Asmodeus, and Asmodeus is the leader of the cult. We don't know who Asmodeus is other than his name. We don't know what he looks like. But his goal is to take down Jack Russell. So the cult are chasing after Jack, and the moon is rising. They've got their weird guns pointed at him, shooting at him, and he transforms into Werewolf by Night, and then kills all of them, or most of them. He kills like a few of them. Some of them are still alive. And then he jumps on the train and he leaves. And the remaining members of the cult interrogate and kill the guy that watches over the trains, asking where the train went. He tells them that it went to New York, and then they kill him. And then they let Belial know that Werewolf by Night that Jack Russell is going to New York, and so they send some guys to go after him. And that's pretty much the first part of the story. Like, we don't actually catch up with Moon Knight until after all this has happened. Jake, luckily, is at Gina's diner, just hanging out with Gina and Crowley, and then he gets a message to meet Detective Flint on a building, where he tells Moon Knight, he's like, hey, I got a note, it's for you, and he gives it to him, and it's from Jack, and Jack is telling him to meet him in Jersey, on the Jersey countryside. And so Moon Knight decides to head there with the help of Frenchie. He heads to the house and he finds another note that says that Jack has locked himself in a spring-locked door, and to barricade it if it's too late, because he'll probably be a werewolf and Moon Knight will be in grave danger. But he is too late, and the werewolf crashes out of the door and attacks Moon Knight, and then jumps straight out the window. And so Moon Knight goes after him, and the werewolf finds a deer and tries to eat it, and he thinks that Moon Knight is trying to stop him from hunting. So he chases after this deer, and Moon Knight chases after him, and then he gets shot by somebody in the leg, and he goes to a bush where he finds one of the weird guns that the cult has, Belial's cult, and then he gets knocked in the back of the head because somebody grabs a log and just smashes him in the back of the head. And then, so that person drives away and says, like, you know, Jack Russell has gotten away, and it's bad because this Moon Knight guy is here, you know, and he's helping Jack. So the werewolf turns back into Jack, and Moon Knight gets up after being knocked out. He finds Jack in the water, and with the help of Frenchie, he takes them back to the house, where Jack says that he, like, explains that he's been chased by this Belial guy for so long. At some point, he was captured by them and given a ton of drugs, but then he got turned into... then he turned into the werewolf and broke free and left, and ever since they've been after him. So they organized this doctor named Dr. Lawson to come and take a look at Jack, and he does a couple of x-rays on him, and he discovers that Jack has a device, a chip in his brain, and that's how Belial is tracking him and figuring out where he is. And so Moon Knight decides to listen to Jack this time, because this is what Jack wants. He decides to tie up Jack and watch him turn into the werewolf and just hope that he doesn't break out of the restraints and try and restrain him. And Jack is like, thanks, man, this is exactly what I want. I just want to be restrained because I don't want to hurt anyone. And then the moon rises, he turns into the werewolf, and immediately breaks out of the chains because the moon doesn't want to be kept, like, the moon doesn't want the beast to be kept within. And so he breaks out. Marlene and Moon Knight are like, ah, crap. And we're left on a bit of a cliffhanger of how are Moon Knight and Marlene going to fight, like, survive the werewolf, because neither of them are strong enough to beat the werewolf. Moon Knight was able to go kind of toe-to-toe with him back when he had super strength and agility, but he doesn't have that anymore, so it's kind of like, what are they going to do? And we're going to find out in the next issue, and it's going to be the final issue written by Doug Moench. For now, like, this is the end of his original run. Alright, so I actually made a mistake. Doug Moench, this isn't his final issue. His final issue is actually issue 33, so we still got 3 issues after this. I don't know why I thought it was 30, I guess because that was a rounded number, but no. So yeah, issue 30, we continue on from where the last issue ended, with Jack Russell turning into the werewolf, and instantly, Moon Knight is like, out of the way, Marlene, get out of here because you're in trouble, I'm about to fight this werewolf. And so Jack just goes straight for Moon Knight, and Moon Knight and the werewolf fight each other. They crash through the window and end up with Moon Knight chasing after the werewolf. And the werewolf throws Moon Knight into a tree, knocking him down for a little while, and the werewolf gets away a little bit. The werewolf runs, climbs up a building, and gets to the top where he sits there, and then Moon Knight sneaks up behind him and punches him in the face before the werewolf can react. And then the werewolf slams into Moon Knight, and they both plummet off the top of the roof. Moon Knight grabs onto a pipe, it breaks off, and they both fall down and are knocked unconscious. Like, they hit the ground and are left in a puddle unconscious. And Belial comes along, finds the both of them, and kidnaps them both, taking them back to his organization, where they have a massive meeting, and he announces to everyone that he's caught the beast and that he will become the beast at Moonlight. They're all a bit skeptical, but they soon kind of, like, they're listening to him. They're ready for the moon to come out and prove that Jack Russell really is the beast. And also that they just have Moon Knight with them, because Moon Knight is keeps getting in their way, so they're going to sacrifice him too. And the idea that Belial has is he's actually going to let the blood out of Jack Russell, and they're going to consume his blood, and they're going to become werewolves. Also, I forgot to mention last issue, Moon Knight doesn't believe in anything supernatural. He thinks Jack Russell is just a biological experiment, like, gone wrong or something. yeah, he doesn't believe in like actual werewolves or vampires or anything like that, which is kind of a fun characteristic for him to have, that he is a skeptic. So yeah, they take Moon Knight away and they go to put him in a cage, and Moon Knight breaks out of the two guys' grasp and beats them up, and then he frees Jack from his shackles and carries him away. And Belial is smacked in the face and is like, because he's failing at the moment, and Belial's like, I promise I'll get him back, and I'll prove to you that I'm right. So they see the helicopter flying away and they start shooting at it, but Moon Knight and Jack get away and they head back. They get the doctor to take out Jack's little microchip, and then Steve takes it and he puts it in his little snooker, like his little pool cue case cabinet, because he wants Belial's men to come and fight him, and so they're gonna follow the microchip and they're gonna find Moon Knight. He tells Marlene to take Jack and get into into Lockley's taxi, and then he tells Frenchie to get up on the roof and listen for him until he's ready to go. And so basically the idea is that when Belial's men come, he's gonna call over the radio and tell Marlene and Jack to floor it to Gina's diner, and then Moon Knight is going to jump onto Frenchie's helicopter and go to Gina's diner as well. And so, yeah, the Belial's men attack the building. They find the chip. Moon Knight attacks him from behind with some pool cues. He tells Marlene to floor it, and she floors it off to Gina's diner in the car, and Moon Knight heads on the helicopter to Gina's diner. They get to Gina's diner, and they chill at Gina's diner for a little while, and Marlene decides to use hypnotism on Jack Russell to make him believe that Moon Knight is his friend. He tells Moon Knight, she basically tells him that, because Moon Knight represents the moon, Moon Knight gives life to the werewolf, and because he gives life to the werewolf, if the werewolf hurts him or kills him, the werewolf will die. And so she's putting it in his mind that if he attacks and kills Moon Knight, he will die. And it works. Moon Knight does become an ally of Moon Knight and fights alongside him later when they test if it actually happened. Moon Knight gets Frenchie to call Belial and say that they've captured the beast, because Moon Knight is going to go in there pretending to be one of their members with Jack. And then while the ceremony is underway, as soon as Belial is about to stab Jack, Moon Knight is going to jump out and attack him, which is exactly what happens. Belial starts the ceremony with Jack, and then just as he's about to stab Jack, he gets blasted in the hand by Moon Knight, and because he's wearing the costume with one of their guns. And then Jack turns into the werewolf, and Moon Knight and the werewolf fight Belial's group alongside one another. And yeah, they fight the guys. Belial is picked up by the werewolf and chucked off of the building to his death. And he dies. And the panels have 1/6 in each panel, so it's 666 across them as he gets thrown off, which is fun. And then Moon Knight and Jack, after Belial has been killed, continue fighting Belial's men until Frenchie comes along with the helicopter so they can make their getaway. They jump onto the helicopter, and they get away, and Moon Knight lets the werewolf go. And so we're left with the werewolf running off down the streets in the rain, off to who knows where, while Moon Knight decides to head home and continue his vengeance, continue fighting crime and stuff. And that's where it ends. That's the end of the crossover. And I liked this. I liked the story, especially because Moon Knight began with The Werewolf by Night, and now it's kind of we've kind of concluded their story. Obviously they're probably gonna meet again, but But this is kind of the conclusion to that arc of like Moon Knight and Werewolf eventually becoming friends, becoming allies. Character development. But yeah, that's the end of that issue. Next, we're going to be talking about issue 31. Oh wait, no, we're not. I forgot. Sorry, I said we were going to be talking about issue 31. You get into this, you just want to keep reading, but this is actually where the episode is going to end. I'm saving issues 31 through 38 for the final episode of the of Moon Knight month. So yeah, that's gonna be it for this episode. This episode is gonna be released on YouTube at the same time or like a little bit after because it has to process. But yeah, so you'll be able to find it on YouTube, and if you do watch it on YouTube, then please subscribe and like the video and comment, and tell me what your favorite part of tell me what your favorite issue of Moon Knight has been so far, of the ones that we've been talking about, or like who's your favorite character or stuff like that. Yeah, if you enjoyed the podcast, please follow the podcast, like the podcast, rate it. It'd mean a lot to me. And share it around with anyone. If you know anyone who might be interested in listening to this, if they like Moon Knight or any superhero stuff, tell them about the podcast. Share it around, and yeah, I'll see you next week where we will be finishing Moon Knight month with the final 8 issues of Moon Knight Volume 1. Have a good one.